I'm Bethany.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome to the Healing Collective podcast, where we explore the paradox of healing at the individual and the collective level.
Join us as we invite guests to share their personal paths to freedom.
Welcome to the Healing Collective podcast.
Thank you.
We're talking about the paradox of healing, so both the individual and the collective level. And I think Lauren and I wanted to invite you on the cast for a couple of reasons, but one is because we are in community with you and have a practice and have been in practice for the last 6 months with you, doing our own work and supporting you around general consciousness work. And then you have this whole career spanning from when you're very young.
Yep.
Around herbs and the herbal industry. And both of those things in my mind are linked to healing, but really, I think we wanted to hear from you a little bit. Mm-hmm. Lauren, do you want to start us off with a little presencing?
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to say real quick that also we're exploring the paradox of healing and the idea that we don't need to heal at all at the same time.
Yeah.
So we like to start with a presencing with our guests and ourselves, just to practice what we preach and bring our attention and awareness here. So I'll just invite you to close your eyes with us and to drop into your body. Notice any fear and anxiety that might be here. Swirling energy. I'm just going to invite us to notice any part of us that feels like we have to play a role or say the right thing, that it has to be perfect. I'm just going to invite our full, most authentic self forward. As we relax into our hips, know we're guided and supported. I'm just going to ask that you bring to mind your intention, how you want to show up, what you want to experience in this hour to 2 hours that we have together. When you're ready, open your eyes. So our first question that we ask everyone is how do you identify yourself, or how do you want to be identified?
I think it depends on who the crowd is, right?
What if me and Lauren are your crowd?
Or the people listening to this podcast, in this moment, how do you want to be identified?
As a vulnerable and transparent human. With very little to hide that I'm aware of.
Anything how does the world identify you? What are some ways that you're identified in the world?
I'm a protector of plant quality. I'm like a plant cop.
I love that. Plant cop.
My career is around making sure plant quality in the dietary supplement industry is there. So that people can take effective products. And since I've been doing it so long, it's unarguably part of my identity. I think the good thing is that whatever other parts of my identity exist are in love with that other part. So, if I wasn't working in this industry or field, I'd probably be doing something with plants somehow, or just every chance I get out in the nature and be with plants.
I don't know your story about that. I don't know anything about how you came to plants.
Would you like to?
Yeah. And I want to point out that look at the alkemist logo behind Elon, for those of you watching on video. It looks like a badge. It looks like your plant cop police badge.
Yeah, it kind of is.
I keep hearing this song, bad boys, right. What you want to do.
That's the worst show and the best show. But and it's funny you say that badge, because my goal is for that to be a badge on products.
That's great.
A symbol of quality to some extent. And we're on the brink of that right now. So it's slowly but surely happening. So But the origin story is my parents. My mom was a microbiologist and worked in kind of a medical facility with an MD who did all sorts of colonics, massage therapy, acupuncture, herbalism, live blood cell analysis. I think they even had aura readings and all sorts of interesting stuff. So I basically grew up in this clinic. My dad was he was first a plumber, and then he became a chemist, and then he became an acupuncturist and herbalist, and then got a degree in chiropractic. So I used to fake earaches to go to school with him. And I was there for his anatomy lab. I remember being like little and looking up at these cadavers. Well, somehow they let me into his chiropractic school for like multiple times into the cadaver labs, which is like, they would never do that now. But so I grew up either in a lab or, in that sort of sciencey setting. And with the herbs, my dad used to make these tinctures. And so when I grew up, a garage was his manufacturing facility, not GMP certified. And there were bags and bags of herbs, like just, brown bags of herbs. And above that were bottles of herbs sitting in alcohol. And then above that was a hydraulic press and then little bottles. And he would make these herbs on the weekends. And I remember the smell as a child, like the bitter green herbs, and that maybe plus when we took vacations as kids, it was always hiking, camping in the sequoias or some sort of forest. So we didn't go to Mazatlan or Cancun or whatever. We went to the forest and hiked. So I grew up very planty and earthly. My dad calls it free range. And so when I became old enough to want or desire a car, I started working for him at about 15 to afford car insurance in the garage, pressing herbs and grinding them and inhaling them and, squeezing them, coming home with like orange hands or spicy hands, depending on what we were extracting. And so then fast forward a few years, I was working in his chiropractic office at the same time. It's like kind of a receptionist or front end person. And right around the same time, we had some trouble with incoming raw materials for the tinctures he was making. So raw herbs would come in and it didn't look right or something was off. And at the same time, the FDA offered some courses on how to do self-regulation. He took the courses, came back with 2 binders like this thick and said, "Hey, read this." And my mom happened to have a microscope at our house for the live blood cell analysis. We still have it here. It's one of our first microscopes. I also remember that looking up at that scope, like from below tabletop height and putting boogers and bugs and snails on this to see what they look like and stuff. So he took those courses, came back. We started deploying the analysis on our incoming raw materials and suddenly failed a bunch of stuff. And these are first huge vendors that we still work with today. They asked why, we told them why, we gave them the results. They said, "Can you check these other 3 samples?" We checked those other 3 samples and suddenly we were testing things more than we were extracting things. And I don't remember how the pivot occurred where we decided not to focus on becoming a tincture business or a company. At this point, I'm in high school, finishing high school and entering college. I think I was a philosophy major for about 4 seconds. And then I switched to botany for about 6 seconds. And then it was business and then chemistry. So I quickly realized that I quickly realized that I didn't want to have a tincture business. I thought the liability behind putting things in people's stomachs felt really uncomfortable. Bethany, you work for a supplement company. There's a whole branch of people who deal with that liability and risk. It's possible. Obviously, there's a lot of great products in the market, but I liked the microscope. I liked the chemistry, and so I got my degree in chemistry, and we focused on turning the operation into a testing facility. And so that was around 97, 98. And now we fast forward to now, and we are the biggest little lab in the dietary supplement industry. And we focus on testing plants and test almost 2,000 of them.
I think it's so interesting that you went from, like, there's these 2 polarities of like science and spirituality. So you've got like your mom running an office where she's like, giving people information on their auras, and in the same split second you're learning chemistry.
Right.
And then even like your dad's kind of varied background and your own, like it's like the spiritual scientist, where a lot of times people feel like those things are in conflict, but you actually are like embodying both of them. And I also think about it just from what I know about you and your personality, like you're either in Vegas in a suit or like camping, like you're doing one of those 2 things. Like you've really married those 2 worlds.
I signed up for a Trunk Club a while back, and it's like a clothing service for people that hate shopping. And so they did this survey, and they're like, okay, look, you can't shop at REI anymore. Okay, you can't look like you're camping all the time. I'm like, I guess. So you nailed it. I mean, that's my choices are let's go hiking or let's go to Vegas in a suit. So it's exactly the case. I remember my mom did live blood cell analysis. So if you know what that is they look at your blood droplets on a microscope and they can see your red blood cells and all these other things. And you can actually do some sort of indications of health and nutrients. And I remember her showing me, like, she pricked my finger, showed my blood, little red blood cells floating around, doing fine. And then she had me eat some potato chips. And then we checked my blood in about 20 minutes. And you can see, I mean, it's not even a theory. You can see the blood cells were stuck together. They were no longer free floating and happy and just they were just clumped as though you would feel after you eat potato chips for 15 years or whatever. And so I remember that moment. I was like, wow, it's very clear that nutrients matter. That here's very simple, easy to see evidence for, a single digit child, like I was 8 or 9 or something like that. But I remember thinking, like, this is somewhere I want to go. I want to do something with this, something with science and nutrients. And fact is, I didn't plan any of this. This is something that sort of presented itself, and I held on really, really tight. And now I'm very pleased that I did, of course. But I was going to get an MBA and work in a cubicle at Citibank or something. I don't know.
I have a couple points of clarification. And these are serious questions. The first one is, I'm going to ask both of them ahead of time because they might even go together. I don't know what a tincture is.
Okay.
And I'm hoping I'm not the only person that maybe someone listening to this also is not sure. The second question is, when you say you made herbs in your garage with your dad, is that code for like marijuana, or is there what herbs are we talking about? Like, how do you choose the herbs?
Sure. We're showing our industry, Elon.
That's great. No, that's fine. So I can't say that there wasn't any marijuana back then in the garage, but no, these are just herbs of medicinal herbs like ginger and ginseng and ginkgo and things like that. And so what we would do is we would take the raw herbs, like literally sticks, leaves, berries in whole form. We had a grinder. We still actually have, those paper cutters you with an arm. We still have that one I used when I was like 6 to chop up osha root. It's in the lab somewhere for paper. So we chop up the herbs, we grind them, we put them with alcohol, vodka. In fact, I remember going to Trader Joe's and buying all the vodka from the shelf with my dad in the store. People were like, what is going on with these guys? Because you couldn't buy alcohol without a license. So you just buy vodka and you kind of adjust the parameters. So tincture is essentially, it's like tea is a tincture. Coffee is a tincture. You're using hot water in the morning with your coffee beans or your tea, and then you get a green or brown liquid, and that's a tincture. So tincture is just a liquid version of an alcohol or glycerin extraction.
And who were your customers, like in the beginning? Like, who buys herbs, tinctured herbs? So
we still have some of the original customers we had. I regret not having that first dollar, store, but we work with companies like Nature's Sunshine, Nature's Way, Strika Botanics, all sorts of Herb Co, Metagenics. These are pretty big brand names. They came to us because they were buying raw ingredients and needed to make sure they bought the right stuff. And just sort of by happenstance, I guess, we didn't have a lot of money. So at that time, we could have purchased equipment that costs, $100,000 for one piece of equipment, or we purchased stuff that cost, tens of thousands. So my dad and I both, we used a room in his chiropractic office to start the lab, actually. The funny story is it was the colonic room that he had. So he had a colonic irrigation specialist in his clinic at some point in time, and they left, and we converted that room into a lab. It had good plumbing, no pun intended. So a lot of companies start in the garage. We started in the colonic room, and so I'm forgetting where I was going with this, but so those customers, they rely on us to make sure they have the right starting ingredients, because a lot of them were focusing on higher end testing. Like, you can spend a lot of money to find out how much caffeine is in green tea, but if you don't know you actually have green tea, there's no purpose, right? So we focused on the first stage of quality, which is identifying you have the right material. Second stage is making sure it's the highest quality or whatever quality you want. And because of our lack of funds, I cashed in a mutual fund that I had. He cashed in a mutual fund that he had. We bought some equipment, and that was the beginning.
So Lauren, like the whole herbal products industry is like, it's a really interesting industry because it's grown exponentially over the last 40 years. It used to be like hippies and herbalists like doing this stuff out of their
colonic
homes.
rooms. Yeah.
Or colonic rooms. And it's really big business now. Like it's a huge industry. But the people who started all of these companies are like every single one of the origin stories I hear are these people who had some sort of transformational experience around healing some sort of illness or sickness using herbs. And so, or nutrition. And so the whole industry is sort of like rooted in healing and like wanting to promote that and wanting people to have access to herbs. So they can take care of themselves. Right. And then like all this money's come in, and now there's, the whole industry has had a lot of transformation, but there's like these really solid roots, and even the community of people that are in leadership in our industry. And for anyone that doesn't know, I still work in this industry. It's like real good people, like real good people who, I don't know anyone who's like here to make a buck. Like I know people who care deeply about each other and the whole, and especially like how to nurture our own bodies. Yeah. And so Elon is like doing this critical gatekeeper role in keeping the industry really pure and reliable and safe. Right. And so, yeah, he's a plant cop for healing. That it's the big idea is to use this stuff to nourish our bodies and our systems.
There's been a lot of consolidation in the industry too, and there are big pharmas here, right? They're in it. They have purchased companies or they've got in, and that was really scary at first, I think, for the industry. But so far in my experience, I'm working with some of the biggest. They just lateral over from big pharma into this other company, and they are exactly what Bethany just mentioned. They were real humans that concern themselves with quality of product and producing a product that is, we can't say intended to treat, prevent, or cure an illness in our industry, but that's obviously the underlying purpose is what we're here for. So, and like Bethany said, there's a lot of really great people in this industry that care.
Mm-hmm. We've like mostly talked about healing in a more esoteric context so far on the podcast, but there's also a very literal response around healing, and even like how we might take responsibility from sort of a conscious leadership perspective. Like how do we take responsibility for caring for our own bodies? So yeah, I'm interested in what you think about both things, Elon. And like maybe a good question, this is the famous question in our industry: what subs do you take? What supplements do you take? And why?
Well, for my purposes of not seeming to endorse brands with this logo behind me, I won't say brands, but I take a probiotic. I take a fish oil. I take tons of zinc and tons of D right now, obviously. I take a C. I take a B in the morning, something for adrenal in the morning, and then a NAD, nicotine, I forgot what that's called. I take a multivitamin, like a men's multivitamin. I take a turmeric product for inflammation. I take a hemp product just so I might be able to sleep better, a melatonin to give me crazy dreams. What am I forgetting? It's a wad every night and every morning. It's a chore, and it's like it's the last thing I do before I, right before I brush my teeth and then turn horizontal and fall asleep. Mm-hmm. So it's a chore that my wife and I either, hand off to who's going to get the vitamins ready in the morning or in the nighttime. And, we give our kids similar. We give them a multi, we give them an oil, I give them a probiotic, I give them a zinc. They love those elderberry chews. They tell them it's candy. We tell them it's candy and they don't know any better. So I take a lot. There's probably more. What's that?
I've had the ginger and the B12 chews.
Yeah. We don't do sugar at my house, so the elderberry candies or the gummies are as close as my kids get. So they don't do better yet, but I take quite a bit, and I'm very picky on the brands I take, obviously, because I test a lot, and also I don't test some. So if I'm not testing some, I don't generally trust is not a word we pass around here. It's verify. It's verify and then offer trust. And then verify again. So
yeah, we really leveled up on supplements with the kids right when Corona like intensity hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, we had a whole lineup of stuff I was giving them before they could leave the house every morning.
Yep. Yep. Believe it or not, my daughter we take your Mega Foods kids multi, because it's great and it's also powder and you can't swallow it so easily. And all the other multis for kids are like sugar coated. My son will put it in orange juice and he'll run to it, like proudly slurp it up and go. My daughter has so much trouble with it. For some reason, she likes it if we take elderberry tincture and put it in, and she'll make a paste. It's like it's concentrated and thicker, and she'll just kind of eat it off a spoon, and that's how she does it. So I want to let you know, Bethany, she eats it like basically raw out of the powder. So,
I'm so happy. I'm gonna deliver this feedback directly to the R&D team so that they've got some.
And the funny thing about supplements is, Bethany can testify, it's like they're not supposed to, you're not supposed to be like, oh, I feel it. If you don't feel it, that's
like an insurance policy.
And if you feel it, it's probably illegal or niacin or something that's going to make you tingle. But most supplements you shouldn't feel or experience benefit from. You just realize, hey, I haven't been sick in a while, or hey, my energy levels are pretty good. And that's kind of like Bethany said, it's an insurance policy.
Well, so tell us about healing. What has your journey been like? What does healing look like for Elon over the course of his life?
It's an interesting topic that I think I've only, through working with Bethany and you, Lauren, in the conscious leadership circles, opened up, I guess. I'm going to try not to fall apart in this call because that's what last night was for. But, it's getting to where I am right now in the industry, or just in owning your own business is wearing, we could have jobs where you just go to work, you do your task, you go home, and that can be hard, but I feel like mine is never ending. And so it's been like full throttle focus on this basically only for a long, long time. And I've managed not to, destroy my body in the process. Fortunately, maybe it's because of all those vitamins, I don't know. But this is hard, doing this. And so there's been very little healing, I should say, until just recently. And perhaps, I'm ready. Perhaps, we had kids. I sort of engineered our staff so that I can be less here. And so I was, on site 3 or 4 days a week for a couple of years, and I'm in late, I'm out early, and so I think because of that setting up of a really great staff that can keep this place going, and then actually not just going, but like thriving and moving and growing in my absence, has allowed me to like realize that time to spend a little time on myself.
How old are you, Elon?
41. I had to look.
So Elon's 41 years old. He's the CEO of this company that he co-owns with his dad. And you've basically been in the throes of building this business since you were in high school.
Yep.
Like you kind of skipped the whole part of life where you kind of like explore and check stuff out and like try these things. Like you went straight into your adult role when you were like 17 years old.
Yeah, I skipped my 20s. Fortunately, my wife and I met in high school. We fell in love romantically end of junior year, and we started dating senior year, and then we started college at the same pace. And we went to the same college at first, then she went somewhere 30 miles that way, I went somewhere that way. So while I was jumping into this career, she was jumping into a PhD program. So we both worked. We went to school, we worked, and then we came home and studied, and we studied next to each other. And so I'm very fortunate and grateful that our trajectories have maintained the same kind of path, because there's so many inflection points in life as a young person, whether it's school or career, that take you in a different route, and then you'd be like, hey, I'm moving, I got a job, or I'm going to school in East Coast, and those kind of things would tear relationships apart. But so we both kind of sacrificed our 20s or so, her to school and career, and then me to this job, to this career. I don't remember feeling like regretful during it, or even now. I mean, I feel not regretful now. I feel like really happy that I did that. But I remember there was actually a time where our old lab was on the second floor, and the stairs had a plant called angel trumpet flower, Brugmansia. It's a big, huge flowers that are beautiful, and they open up at night. There's also some special chemicals in their seeds. My dad and I planted it when we moved into that facility, and it was 12 feet by the time we left. But in the early years, I would work, I'd go to school, I would then in college, and I would then come to work at 3 o'clock, and I'd work for 10, 12 hours. And so it'd be like 2 or 3 in the morning, I'd walk down those stairs, which is right when Brugmansia is sharing its beautiful odor, for moths or bats. And what's interesting about that now is if I walk past, there's a plant in my neighborhood that has it. And if I walk past it and I smell that odor, it brings me back like to like a kind of a lonely place, not maybe some sadness in there, but it's more of just kind of like, my friends are going to raves in the desert. I'm working. They're going to parties after school. They're going to, 4-year universities and being in fraternities and all this crazy shit. And, I was working in the lab. So it's funny that smell brings back those kind of memories still to this date. But yeah, there was a lot of sacrifice in my 20s so that I, might not have to sacrifice in my 60s or 70s or 80s. Who knows? So
yeah, I guess I'm also thinking about the fact that you're working in an industry and for an industry that's all about nourishment. And there's this way where it sounds like you've been maybe undernourished in some ways.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think it's wrong or bad to jump off on your career like before you're even done with high school.
Yeah.
But it sounds like there's definitely a lot of choices and like trade-offs that got made.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, aside from your supplement routine, like what nourishes you?
Yeah. So my answer to that question was working out. And that was past tense. So I wanted to enter my 30s in the best shape of my life. And my sister's boyfriend at the time was working out with this trainer at the beach in Long Beach, 6 a.m., rain or shine, 38 degrees or 75, doesn't matter. And I was like, wow, that sounds awful, and sign me up. So it was called boot camp, and it was, for us civilians who want to pretend like we're Navy SEALs, and it was awful. And, I did it for 10 years. And that's what I think kept me sane for that period of time. Like maybe that's what I was able to hold on to, like, as healing. There were some medicinal plants in the mix here and there as well in that. I'm happy to talk about those as well.
Yeah, there's no way you can be in the industry this long and have
right.
parents as big of hippies as your parents are, and not get on the fringes of plant medicine.
Sure.
So
yeah, I have a really great relationship with cannabis. Have for a long, long time. In fact, when my parents divorced, my dad cleaned out his closet, and I was looking for my bar mitzvah stuff because I was in his closet, and I moved some stuff around, didn't find it. Continued along my way. My very distraught mom ran up to me, accused me of stealing the pot. I'm like, what pot? The pot that your father left near your bar mitzvah bag. And I'm like, I hadn't even seen it. She also didn't go out and take it either. So the next day I went back there and retrieved the pot that I had allegedly found, brought it to school, sold it to someone else, and then bought a new pot. So
how old are you?
This is 13 and a half. So
oh my God, I love this
story. So we've been friends with cannabis, and I've been friends for a long time. It's definitely I would say, admittedly, an abused vice on my part, but also it's kept me from working too much. Just stopping, taking a mental break, and just, whether it's riding a bike or playing whatever, just not working. It's how I turn it off, and still use it to date for that purpose.
So here's something interesting. So like I grew up in like a kind of a little bit of an intense like Christian subculture. Like I went to Christian schools and Christian camps and church and all this kind of stuff. And there was this huge like backlash of like, if you're really controlling your kids a lot, then it's like if you tell your kids they can never have like a treat or a snack or sugar, like as soon as they get a little agency, like they're going to McDonald's. Like if you've demonized McDonald's, like they're like, what is all this about? I got to go there. And the thing that I've experienced more than anything else in the natural products industry is like people who were raised by hippies. Like my friend Sarah, her dad was like the general counsel for the Transcendental Meditation Organization, and like they lived in like in the Midwest, and like doing meditation was like so ingrained in her as a child that her rebellion is like being not into and over meditation. And then similarly Elon, I got into my mid 30s, and I started, I was on my path, and I started using herbal medicines and psychedelic medicines with guides, and taking it pretty seriously and having these really radical experiences. I talked to Elon, he's like, oh, whatever. Like, he's like, yeah, I've gone to all the ayahuasca circles, and like, this is all stuff he did when he was young. He's like, over it now.
Right. Like I was like 14 when I did my first circle. And
well, literally today, we're at a circle today. Like the three of us are in like a 10-week circle right now. And on the boards, on the Slack boards, Elon today, like I put up a Ram Dass article, and Elon casually drops that him and his dad and Ram Dass were like buddies, and his dad like helped make the LSD for Ram Dass, and like all this stuff about, and I'm like, this blows my mind. But this is what I'm talking about. This is like our industry. It's all these hippies and everyone kind of reacting in this counterculture way. People that are in my generation, in the 30s and 40s, are like over all the stuff that is sort of mainstream at this moment, or becoming more and more mainstream, which I find hilarious. But can you talk a little bit about that? What's it like? What was your first psychedelic experience?
So, I told you how I found pot in my parents' closet, sold it, and procured more pot. And then
businessman was fully awake at 13.
What's really funny about that is, and then in high school, I had a girlfriend for a short period of time, and her ex-boyfriend came to my house, heard that I had pot, demanded it. He's going to kick my ass if I didn't get it to him. So I'm like, okay, I got your pot. Went in the backyard, took some lawn clippings. And mind you, I now run a company that tests adulterated plants, right?
You gave him adulterated material?
I gave him adulterated
This happens all the time, actually. I was a middle school principal, and they sell it. They try to sell it to each other. And then I did some herb testing as a principal as well, actually.
So my part is that my grass was so good, they came back for more. They wanted more of my fake grass. And so this time I sold it to them. And I think I brought in a couple $100,
this
freshman
man was
year.
always meant to be a CEO.
Right. I mean, his purpose was clear.
Right.
Okay.
So my dad is a chiropractor, has some interesting gigs. His good friend still to date was the medical doctor for a big concert hall. It was called Irvine Amphitheater over here in Southern California. It's gone now, actually. But so when Anthrax shows up and tells Dr. whoever that they want a chiropractor, he would call my dad and say, can you be the chiropractor? When John Bon Jovi wants a chiropractor, they'd call my dad. When the Led Zeppelin, the Robert Plant Band wants a chiropractor, they'd call him. So we would go to these really, really great concerts, backstage passes, front row. And so some of my time I'm at an Anthrax, White Zombie, NWA concert. You remember that when they were all together?
Yeah.
It was as violent as it could get in the mosh pit. And we were one seat back with my dad, my mom, my sister, my brother, and me, just all sitting there looking at this concert. And I remember telling my dad, this is I think 14. I remember like, oh, that pot smells really strong. And he's like, how do you know what pot smells like? And I was like, guilty. And then that was it. And then he and I were hiking, maybe months later in the local mountains, and he pulled out a pipe and had some hash. And he's like, hey, you want to smoke some hash? And I was like, is this one of those tests? Am I supposed to say no? So I said yes. We smoked it. It happened to be very old and was ineffective. But so that was his first time smoking in I think 15 or 20 years. He actually went completely nothing for a long, long time. Not because there's any problems. I think it was just kind of like the beauty of abstinence or something like that, and then starting back up. So unfortunately, I introduced him back into pot, and then he connected with some of his circles, and he was closer with Ralph Messner, who was part of the three. Ram Dass was doing the meditation. Timothy Leary was, I think, maybe even dead at that point, and then Ralph Messner was still academic and still less hippie than the other guys, I think, but he was doing these ceremonies. So I went to a local mountain. It was a cabin, a group of folks.
Are these the ones where they layer everything and they give it to you
there was two things. It was I think it was a seed called Syrian rue, which is an MAO inhibitor, which helped amplifies things. And then it was San Pedro cactus. Instead of peyote, it was the mescaline from San Pedro. So we did this whole retreat, this multi-day experience. I was by far the youngest person there by about, I was 14, 15, half everyone's that age. I know that's illegal now, and maybe they're going to come get my dad, but come on. But it's funny that experience was eye-opening for me, for the point where we have values on our walls. And one of the newest ones I put up there was reciprocity, which means, doing, treat other people how you want to be treated, right? Don't be a dick. And Ralph had this 3 R's. There was respect, reciprocity, and reverence. And so he kind of like spoke on those words, and similar to with conscious leadership and how you sometimes we have people just kind of make noises. They had this opportunity for everyone to go around and either sing or do something, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. So even back then, I just didn't feel comfortable.
Especially 14-year-old you, yeah.
So everyone's like, doing the most beautiful Om as possible, or singing some song they had made or something like that, and I was like, this is.
Wow, even on medicine, you're
the next time you're like, I'm not standing, I have to do a drum triangle.
Yeah, exactly.
Like 14-year-old Elon's here and he's telling us all to fuck off.
Exactly. So that was my first experience. The second one, and that was minor. It wasn't very strong. It was more about the whole experience of being guided with, the great Ralph Metzner and all that stuff. He actually came to my 21st birthday party, actually. And it was at I think TGI Fridays, and I was drunker than shit. And it was my dad and Ralph, which is his friend. But few months later, went to the High Sierras, local mountains in California, and took a grip load of mushrooms with Syrian Rue, and spoke to the mountains, and literally laid under boulders with a babbling brook below us on the side of a cliff. And we all cried together, we laughed together, we got sunburnt together. It was just a magical experience. And I came back, told my friends to share this experience, and I didn't realize how special I have it. Most people don't have these relationships with their parents.
Right.
And if they do, the parents are taking mushrooms and hiding of their kids or whatever. But it was that mushroom moment that I realized I'm an atheist, actually. So I'm Jewish by culture, which there's no reason to get rid of, but I would never bought a second of it as a religion. So when I took mushrooms, it made me realize that all of these really powerful feelings and experiences can be induced by chemicals from plants or fungus, and that to me was evidence enough that it's sort of, and with all due respect to anyone, whatever floats your boat, I know a lot of good people who have been saved by religion, and that's what they needed. But for me, it felt contrived because I can turn it on and off with, or some version of it on and off with medicines. And I've done that throughout my life, throughout the rest of the time, turn it on and off. So
that's an first interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so somewhere between San Pedro and then psilocy were my first two big experiences. Yeah.
I remember, I don't know if you knew this, but I had a couple synchronicities listening to you talk, like with the concert thing. I used to work in the music industry, and I was a runner. So I was the person who was like, I know the best chiropractor, I know the best Thai food, I know where we can get dry cleaning done in 6 hours.
Yeah.
And I had that thought scurry by while you were talking about it. But also I went to seminary right out of high school, which was sort of like my bid to, if I was going to stand behind Christianity, I was like, well, I need to know everything about it so that I know, like, I wanted to kick the tires. And unfortunately, where I went to school was like not a great school. And I was like, everything crumbled pretty fast when I got there. And I really deconstructed my religion, I would say. Yeah. And then my experience of psychedelics in adulthood has been like there was so much stuff that I was like, well, this doesn't make sense. This isn't true. These contradict each other. That's not what the original Greek actually says. And the translation's not good. And all this, like I had all of this technical deconstruction of scripture.
Right.
And then I was like, oh my God, the burning bush makes so much more sense now. I was like, oh wait, there may be a lot of.
They did know what they were talking about. They downloaded the 10 Commandments on San Pedro.
It's a whole new look at some of this stuff that I wrote off. Yeah. So it's interesting that your ability to tap into some kind of intelligence. That your experience of that is like, well, there is no intelligence since I can control
just the chemical
experience of it.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Whereas I probably have maybe the polar opposite experience, which is like, I kind of I feel like I'm sleeping most of the time, and I'm working on increasing my ability to tap into that, whether with medicine or without.
Right.
And I have like a deeper and deeper trust in something intelligent.
Right.
And what exactly that is still up for exploration more, but.
Yeah. But I had a mind-shattering salvia experience years later that just completely reaffirmed that, this is all bullshit. Like this is
Say
nothing.
more.
I don't like to compare things to movies, but you know, in The Matrix, when he realizes he's just in a little bubble with a bunch of tubes and next to a bunch of people with bubbles, it was this realization that, you know, I took 2 or 3 really humongous hits of salvia herb in a water pipe and just, you know, blew the third one out and just, you know, left. And what I realized very quickly, that I was realizing what was real and leaving what was not real. I very quickly missed my girlfriend, who's my wife now, because I didn't want to leave her. And I very quickly missed my mom, who was, you know, not in the same room, neither were in the same room as my dad and my brother at the time. And I was transported to this, and I wasn't like in a capsule in a big vault, but it was that sense that it was like, we're just a bunch of weird automatons just moving around this planet like we're ants, you know, in our own little ways. Like the ants have purpose, they're doing a thing, they know exactly what they're up to. They I don't know if they have egos or not, but that all of this was just like false. And I remember thinking like, I don't want to be here. I want to go back to false land. That's cool. That's feels safe and comfortable. But and what's interesting about salvia is you go up like a rocket ship and you come right back down like a rocket ship. And then you're like, all right, let's go to dinner. And you're just perfectly fine. You're not, there's no like, you know, slow coming down. It's on and off. And I remember like leaving that experience and going to the rock climbing gym and having like the most amazing session of exercise I ever had, and just realizing like this can be turned on and off. Like this level of awareness of the universe, or just love to what is, I don't know if that makes sense, can be, you know, induced or contrived. And I think with religion, you know, I would just gonna guess that 75% of people who are religious are that way because their parents, you know, engineered it. I'm always fascinated by the folks who are not religious that become religious. And those are the folks in my experience, that they're looking for insurance. They have a great life. There's this insurance plan. It's called religion. And if you pray and if you believe and you follow and you're good, you'll, you know, mostly go to heaven, and you can see your grandpa and your dog and all these kind of Disney-like things. And I just thought like that's such garbage. Like that's just, I mean, it's sad and lonely being an atheist, because when I do die, I'm just going to turn into dirt. And my whatever, and this is why I believe, of course, I won't see Michelle or my kids or whatever, and just lights are out. The electricity turns off. That's that. It's almost as though it never was. But the psychedelics part of me is the fun part, because that's like, I believe this cold-hearted, sad and lonely atheist belief, but I know that I can turn it on with a medicine of some sort and, you know, feel the other part of that I don't normally feel. And that's what I think is interesting about psychedelics in general, whether it be salvia or, you know, ayahuasca or mushrooms or whatever.
One thing I'm noticing, the thought that, like, you know, generally speaking, when I coach people, some common issues are they're not living their most authentic life. They're not living their purpose. They're like 35, 40 years old, figuring out like, oh, I've been programmed or engineered to be someone, and I don't think it's who I am. And then on top of that, like, I really would like to like have more intimate connections, and all my relationships have been shit and blah, 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 right? And I listen to you and I'm like, it's like, yeah, you skipped your 20s and you didn't get to party in the desert. But I'm like, you've been living aligned to purpose, it feels like, since the very beginning. You know, you have this like life partner that seems like it just feels very authentic and organic. And just my experience of who you are as a man and your relationship to feminine energy, and just how you express yourself suggests that you are a person who lives with integrity and some alignment both inside and outside of you. So I was reflecting on that a lot. And then I was thinking like, I wonder if doing drugs really young helped with that. Like,
No,
because I have a theory, like with my son, like I want to introduce all of that to him, and just the way that I want him to experience it with me. And I don't want there to be fear around it. And I have this like theory that, and you know, I'm going to show some of my biases here, but that specifically if men like have some of those experiences before their wiring is all worked out and recreated patterns, like there's some hope.
Yeah, I think there's some merit to that. I have kids now, and they're 4 and 3, and I think about when I started taking drugs, that just sounds bad, but just, exploring medicines from plants at 13, would I be cool with that? And I think the answer is no. I mean, it's a little early, but I don't know how many times I've taken LSD, because I lost count, and all of those times were before I was 18. So, and that's a lot of, it's in the teens. I know that's how many times I took it, and all before my adult brain was done being formed, which is, all parents' big concern, that our kids' brains will form correctly. And
right, they're going to be that egg in the frying pan in the dairy.
Yeah, exactly. The don't do drugs. The DARE program that clearly didn't work.
And even the responsible psychedelic industry is like not until you're grown up, the risks are, so it's a really.
Yeah, I mean, I should add, for my parents' safety, that none of those encounters were with them. Those are just kind of who I ran with in junior high and high school and whatever. But I can't say with any certainty that it wired me differently. But I mean, if you've ever taken those products, it wires you differently, especially while your brain is developing. And I don't know that I'm some superhuman as a result of it, but I think it has given me some just sort of maybe an advantage of thought and just openness
perspective
or empathy, or just I'm going to go back to reciprocity, just like being able to stop, take a step out of what you're driving, what you're wearing, who you're hanging out with, and just realizing, are you doing good? Who are you doing it for? What, why are you here? And I think the lab has given me a purpose, because I fucking hate cheaters. And that's what we do. We're cops. We make sure people don't cheat. And I love nothing more than failing something and having someone coming back be like, well, it's right. And then we just ask for the data, and then they were quiet. And we're like, well, there's, we're done. We got you, So it feels good. And it's given me this ability to kind of focus on something that is fun and nerdy, but also there's, I'm not saving children that are starving, but I'm, we don't make products, but we make sure the products are good. And that feels like I'm helping out with human nutrition all over the world in that process. And I think I want to say that the psychedelics at a young age had some sort of effect. We'll never know. They won't allow studies like that for a long time. So.
Well, I think the transition to my next question would be like, so as a result of both your lab experience and your psychedelic experiences, what do you believe about plants for collective healing? What is the role of plants in collective healing? I
think plants are the solution to all illness. If I didn't grow up the way I did, and I didn't meet Michelle earlier, I could see I could have gone off to college somewhere else and studied pharmacognosy or ethnopharmacognosy. Like, put me in the jungle, let me watch the birds and the primates and see what they're doing. I'll go collect those specimens, bring it back to the fancy lab, run the analysis, see what's in them. And I guarantee you we'll find stuff that's important. That's Bethany, our friend Holly.
I was just going to say, that's pretty much what Holly did.
Yeah, so when we interviewed Holly, I'm like, oh my God, this is what I wanted to do, and again, no regrets, but it just wasn't the right path for me. I wanted to be home. I wanted to continue with this company and, stay with my girlfriend. So I have this fascination with plants that grow in cracks, and I'm in California, so it rains like 3 times a year, but there are cracks in the middle of the road that got no water, maybe a little moisture in the morning dew, but no care, no soil, no fertilizer, no water, and they grow 5-6 feet. And right behind my office is a wall and a train track, and there's 6 foot tall weeds. There's no water. It's like it's rocks, it's gravel. Yet they're growing 6 feet tall. The stems are this thick. Generally, all the good plants have like thorns, or they're partially poisonous, or they're kind of like tough plants. Cannabis, it's a weed. It grows basically next to train tracks if you let it. So where I'm going with this is my fascination with plants, and where the company's going next is the ability to grab that plant, put it in the lab, run it for interesting compounds, see if,
what makes it so strong? What makes it so durable?
Yeah.
Do you know that Tupac poem, "The Rose That Grew from Concrete"?
No, but I should.
Oh, you absolutely should. I mean, he writes a poem. It's an autobiographical poem and book about himself as a rose that grew from concrete.
Yeah, and look at him. I mean, he's a poet. With chemistry, it's super complicated, but it's also simple. Like, if something's shaped like this and you find something else like this, it's going to do something similar. If you turn it this way and you add a little thing, you can create a cancer drug or an Alzheimer's drug or a COVID drug or something like that. So to get back to your question, I think the answer to a lot of the world's health problems are locked up in plants that we have not yet even found and then this gives rise to, deforestation and all the, terrible things we're doing to the earth, that we potentially could lose these solutions. But the fact is, the majority of all pharmaceutical drugs came from some original plant drug or some chemical comes from plants. They took that and they mimicked it to make it synthesizable and sellable, and now it's Celebrex or whatever X, or
Do you want to hear the poem?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Wait 1 second, just a question. You know who Tupac is?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Yeah.
just checking.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just let you know, I love the music of rap and hip hop. I've never been a huge fan of the words. I also don't like lyrics of all. Just my brain, I never listen to lyrics. It's always the music. So I have
Just
tons
the way
of
you responded, I was like, I don't know, maybe he didn't know who Tupac was when I said it.
I'm in a pretty white, but I know.
But then you could be like, oh, I went to his concert with my dad because my dad was his chiropractor, and
Right?
then we did acid afterwards.
He grows between rocks. He doesn't live under a rock.
Okay. Yeah, let's hear it.
The rose that grew from concrete. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared.
Wow. I mean, that's...
Well, when you were talking about that, I thought about Tupac, but I thought about so many students, so many people that I've worked with over the years that, like, if we're judging them by life standards, like the level of complexity and obstacles that were put in front of them were unimaginable to some of us. And they just consistently pushed and grew, and 5 feet, and I could see the metaphor of all the people who are the plants that grow in concrete.
It's been coined in the book terms of it's the adversity advantage, right? I don't know if, Bethany, you were at the MBJ where they had, I forgot that Dr. Amen?
I forget, but
yeah,
I
mean, he talked about the adversity advantage of in botany, there's something called Geonastic Movement. So like when wind blows against the plant will grow, either knock over and die, or it'll grow stronger. And the sides where the wind is growing will actually have more fibers on the structural side. So same thing works for humans. I mean, some of the best humans in this world came out of adverse situations. And I believe that the plants that are growing in adverse locations, contain a lot of really special.
Well, that's what I think is so cool, is that part of it. When you said that, like, we need to be studying them, and there's this, idea in the work that I do. It talks about designing for and with the margins. And it's the idea that if you design or for with people at the margins, whether it's someone with disabilities, a racial marginalization, there's someone who's homeless. If you design things for those people, you are designing them, they will serve everyone moving forward. And I love to frame it in that place of, like, because they have something special and they are adding something and contributing something and able to move through things that the average person cannot.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of intelligence locked up in those margins, untapped.
I noticed that talking about this, like I'm get a little below the line because, well, like in our industry, we both sit on the American Herbal Products Association board. I sit on the American Botanical Council board of trustees. Like there's a lot of herbal work and thoughts around sustainability. And ABC, American Botanical Council, put out one of the most recent issues of Herbalgram was all about how climate change is threatening all of these different herbal species. Like most stuff's been growing in one place for a really long time, and there's really these specific conditions of how something grows in one place. And with the climate changing, a lot of herbs are at risk of getting wiped out. And when I start to think about this stuff, my heartbreak, the reason I'm below the line is because I am not willing to feel, or maybe I don't feel the capacity to feel all my heartbreak around the earth dying. And I still see it as a real problem most of the time. But I think about that. I think about, what is our consciousness and how we treat this planet and how we treat even the plants. And
And if we acknowledge that they're healing the other part of us, that we become consumers, and then, you know, even like psychedelics like Toad and all these things where like, you know, they're almost having to make synthetics because people have gone so ham around like, oh, we need more of this, that they're killing out the environment to access it.
Yeah. You know, my stance is that we're going to be okay. Like, we're going to lose some stuff along the way. But there's been some interesting movements just in my, you know, consciousness of recent years, like even just the Arab Spring. Like, what happened there was, you know, legendary. It hasn't happened yet. You know, we had our own sort of weird version of that recently here in this country, but I don't think it's going to go to shit. We're all just like, you know, the few survivors are going to live in basements until the sun shows up. I think we might lose some species. The white rhino will go, you know, maybe some orcas and stuff like that, and some plants will lose. But I think, you know, even what happened with the stock market recently, if everyone's like, you know what, if we get together, we can screw these big pharma bros pretty good. And they did. And no one's done that yet. They all combined and they got online and social media and they're like, hey, let's do the opposite of what these guys are doing and make them pay. And they did it. And all the people are like, wait, what?
If anyone doesn't know, I don't know, Lauren, if you know what he's talking about.
Okay,
literally the last 48 hours, like over this last week. Do you know how hedge funds work? It's a manipulation of the stock market.
I'm learning so much today. It's like, who knew?
But there's a sort of this like populist, not truly anti-capitalist movement, but it's like a bunch of gamers on Reddit got together and all bought in stock on GameStop, the store.
Yeah, GameStop, yeah.
Because it was like basically hedge funds thought that it was going down in value and they were doing manipulations so that would be valuable for them essentially. Right. That company would be failing. They would make money off that. And so all these Redditors were like, no. And they all put in their small amounts of money and bought up all this stock. And that's bad for the hedge funders. Like they actually had to pay a bunch of money back. Yeah. And it's like bankrupting certain people that make a lot of money doing this kind of stuff. And it's like at once I was scrolling through since the middle of the night. I woke up and I was scrolling through.
My brother made a joke. Like, I wish I bought GameStop.
That's why
GameStop stopped. And I was like, okay, I don't get it.
People have been making millions of dollars over the last several days.
From $50,000 investments.
Yeah. Or a couple $100. A lot of people only had $300, but they're like, I'm not selling this. I'm not selling it. So like they're basically saying fuck you. Yeah. The way that people like, I think 50% of the stock market is owned by like the top few percent of people, and 90% of the stock market is definitely owned by like most people don't have, like average person doesn't have a lot of money in the stock market. Right. And so it's not like how healthy the stock market is not like a realistic position on the health of everyone that's in that economy. It's only the people that.
It's kind of like remember, like, don't drive on Fridays. Let's screw the oil companies. If everyone doesn't buy gas on Friday, we'll hurt them. And there was like these efforts, and you know, nothing happened. And to me, like, this is the beauty of social media, is the speed at which we can convene and show our power. You know, I've talked to my customers that, you know, the buying power is in with you. Like, if someone sells you bad stuff and your lab says it's bad, and the supplier's like, well, no, I don't believe lab. And you're like, well, cool, I'm going to take my business somewhere else. You have the buying power to make change. And these people collectively put it together and crush billionaires who never even thought. And I don't have a problem with billionaires. And like, but it's just kind of interesting to watch and see that
this is a really big, and here's the connection I'm making. And maybe y'all made it, but we were talking about plants pushing through the concrete. And in the metaphor, concrete are these systems that feel completely unmanageable for the average person to break through. I had a 4-hour session with a group of school leaders from Philadelphia this morning who found out yesterday from their district that they are to open schools in a week. They're being given a week. While we're doing the call, one of the principals gets a phone call that someone on their staff's father died of COVID. It's just, they know the district is sending literally lies to families to try to get them to come to school. And the exhaustion, and I mean, my heart was breaking listening, especially because I've been in that role and, you know, I saw myself in them. And the way that they were like, we've got to burn it down, basically, but at the same time felt like it's impossible. The system, the education system is so big and so broken. I kept thinking, if all of y'all quit today and walked away, right? Like, what could happen, you know? And so I just, when it comes to collective healing, I actually, and you know, my mentor talks about this all the time and during COVID, and she's like, if a bunch of us stopped paying our mortgages, if a bunch of us like just went to Home Depot and like demanded supplies for like COVID victims, and she means a lot, you know, obviously there has to be a tipping point, but I agree with you. I don't actually know if there's another way that I can imagine. I'm sure there are infinite possibilities, but I think breaking through concrete is what is trying to happen.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
and it lines up with the astrology that's happening right now too.
Oh,
It's the beginning of a whole new period that's like Aquarian, and yeah, it completely lines up with the astrology.
So Lauren, you said collective healing. I mean, that's what I'm talking. I think we'll be okay. I think there's this movement of collective efforts, you know, and you want to talk about religion, in my opinion, it's collective consciousness. Like, you know, I know that being mean to people is bad, right? It's not good. I know that murdering people is, I don't need religion or laws. I mean, that's just kind of what I believe. You take that same moral compass, combine it with a lot of people, throw social media in the middle, we can get a lot of stuff done. So I think we're going to lose some plants, we're going to lose some animals, you know, there'll be some fires and some hurricanes. And I think maybe when we're all dead, the climate will have begun to correct itself, or some version of that. You know, and I have this interesting perspective because when we started the lab, my first job was working in a microscope. So I spent, you know, 10 years just literally staring at a microscope, looking at tiny little things, which I think is fantastic. There's a whole universe down there, you know, right. So you kind of like, we can get stuck with like the road that's still under construction in a neighborhood, our local Congress, what's happening with your work. And it's this big. It's nothing.
Right.
It doesn't even matter.
Well, that's my religion. My religion is the laws of nature. If I was to make it very simple, right. And I do have some sense that those laws, and I feel and I experience a field of energy that, so like that everything else is kind of growing around, I would say, right? Yeah. So the sunlight or the, and I trust those laws. I trust that they want what's best, that they want the most life, you know, that they want the most good. And when I see plants and I see ecosystems and I see my body and the way that it was designed to function, I'm like, that's some smart ass shit right there, you know? And like, that's my religion.
Yeah.
I am making myself feel a little better with the way you guys are talking. And sometimes I talk exactly like you guys. So I don't know if it's the polarity that's pulling this up in me, but it's like with this stuff with GameStop, I can feel the terror of like the hundreds of millions of people who have a certain idea about what security looks like financially. And it has to do with markets and saving and IRAs and this whole situation and your 401k and this steady, ever growing market, which I know that it's like a total house of cards. Like I really do think it is. And I don't even have any money in the stock market.
I'm like, well, I'm going to have some probably tomorrow.
And I am terrified. I feel the terror. Like, I do think what you guys are saying is true. I can find the one in me that knows I do think we'll be okay, you know, by my definition of that.
Yeah.
But like the amount of disruption and terror and suffering that is going to be happening in and around all of this, I am bracing. I feel a bracing.
Well, that's the paradox.
My adrenaline was like pumping, reading through those Redditors. Like there was a lot of stuff on Twitter, people like posting some of the stories, and I was enthralled, and I could feel like all my 8 energy of like, fuck yes. Like when people come together and do something so fucking simple, and it's like, and now they're like, hold on, maybe we got to change how the stock market works. Like literally it's like red flags and everyone's like, hold on a second.
Close it up.
Well, it's like voting in Georgia. It's like what happened with Georgia. Like, but here's the paradox that I've been playing with, like over the last few months. I have dealt with a lot of loss, like my dad, and then 3 students were killed tragically, very close together. And at the same time, some exquisite moments of joy, like in the first half of the year. And I feel like what I'm being taught by my universe or my messages is like the paradox of duality, the paradox of being human is that you can hold the suffering and the terror while also holding the possibility, the access to the ways that we're eternal, the ways that we're just ants. Like, can we hold both of that? Because when we lose one or the other, the disequilibrium is too much. Like if I listen to these principles and I just kind of bypass the terror and exhaustion and overwhelm and thought about the impact on all the kids that they're serving and all the needs that they have. Like if I bypass that, then I am not experiencing my full humanity and I'm actually not holding the reality that's there.
Right.
And then at the same time, you can get lost in it. Like how many people are like, just scared to death to leave their homes and have created paranoia about all the things that are happening. And that can also be really toxic. So paradox seems to come up a lot in the healing conversation. And I think that's definitely one of them.
Every time we have a conversation around this for the podcast, it's like the way I see collective healing and how I even want to be of service in that conversation or transition is emergent. It's changing every conversation, but I can see how just the simple principle of wholeness and holding both of those things at the same time and standing for that and teaching people and modeling people how to stand for both of that is maybe the new security that can weather like all of the great amounts of change that I assume will be both empowering and terrifying that I think are going to be happening here in the decades to come.
Yeah.
But I get excited thinking about that.
Yeah. I mean, with the GameStop thing, like this just what's happened just recently. Now they realize their power. What's next? What are they going to shut down? Right. Which billionaire groups are now shown vulnerable because the collective healing of the disproportionate wealth in this world is now,
because people start to realize their power. Like I just had the thought, what if every Amazon worker was like, I'm not fucking taking any packages.
Right.
Like we are so dependent on Amazon as a culture. Like that's the part. It's like the system or the concrete has really taught us to actually internalize the belief that it's hopeless. It's hopeless. Don't even try it. It's just you by yourself. Here's what's going to happen. And all of a sudden it's like, we're like, wait, there's a lot of us concrete plants. Like there's a whole bunch of us. Like if we all started growing, we might be able to do something.
Yeah.
And from where are we all doing that stuff? Like when you start to come into your power, from what place? From a place of presence or from a place of blame, reactivity, fear, victimhood, anger, resentment, like from revenge, from what place are we doing that? What is the world we want to create? What kind of consciousness do we want to step into as we come into that power? Is it just a new, different looking version of the same stuff? Yeah. Is it a shift of power for its own sake, or does it look like something new?
Yeah, it's a balance, because we still have to go to work. We still have to pay our electric bills, these transactional things that are meaningless. And we still have our egos to support, I mean, I've lost mine a few times. It's there, it's gone, it's there, it's gone. I want expensive toys and a nice home, but, and then down the street is some person experiencing homelessness. It's just this really strange, like I can give all my money to this person, right? I can give everything I have to this person, and then where will I be? Where will my family be? So to me, where I'm going with this is it can't be an extreme on either spectrum. It has to be a really good, and not in a two-dimensional spectrum. It has to be this sort of, this multi-dimensional give and take, where we all fit together in this world, this universe, and that's what at least feels good about my career is like we're doing well. And I think, it's like I'm feeding hungry people, but we're making sure that the products that millionaires and billionaires are selling are going to make them more money.
This goes back to my idea of this as being my religion. Cause I'm like, this is what I tell myself a lot. Like an orchid was always going to be an orchid. Like that was the seed. Like an acorn was going to be an acorn tree. Like I love that about plants.
Yep.
And I think about that of my own seed, you know, and like what I was called to be. And I can see how we can get pulled away from our seed, or we can pretend that we're like an orchid in this metaphor. An orchid be like, you know what, I really want to be a fern. I'm going to pretend to be a fern. But like at the end of the day, you're still an orchid. And so so my story is that if we were all doing the thing that is our seed to do, the ecosystem of humanity would thrive, because that balance of nature is calculating all the numbers and matching it up. And maybe even if we don't do it, it's still going to be okay.
Right.
But I guess I say that to say that I think you finding your purpose and doing exactly what you were called to do is your perfect participation in, you know, balancing the equation of what, you know, of life.
Well, similar to you, you've had a lot of a rough year. I don't need to go into great details, but you know, in my entire life, it's like never been this heavy.
This is your podcast, man. If you want to tell us about your life this year.
I was gonna. My next question was, what's next for your healing?
Yeah.
And so I think it's first, like, what's been happening.
So I used to work with this trainer. He would always describe a back end or front end excuses, and he would actually keep the text messages that I would send him at 5:30 in the morning. I have a headache. My cat threw up. I mean, and every time I would be like, oh, I can't come to the workout this morning because, and he would send this multi-scroll list of all of my excuses. He's like, back end excuse, front end excuse. I have a meeting, front end excuse. I don't feel good. So I've been using a lot of back end excuses for my own health. Like I'm too busy, all this stuff, you know, whatever it is. And, you know, like I said, this last 390 something days have been really heavy. So I've been just sitting on that, just using it as an excuse not to care for myself, not to worry about sleep or health or, maybe abuse of vices. And, knock on wood, I don't like to count chickens before they hatch. And I'm not a very spiritual person for the sense of like believing what I just said. But like my mom just got deemed cancer free. My dad is stepping out of COVID. I finally feel like, if you ask me how things are going, I would say everything's almost great. And I've been saying that for 3 years because my stepmom was sick with cancer for a year ago. She died a year ago and she was sick for 2 years. So for the last 3 years, I've not been able to say everything's great. Because it's not, it's, almost everything's great. Like my wife and kids are fine. Everyone's healthy. And then it wasn't one person, it was another person. So right now, actually, for the first time in a while, I feel like for the moment, everything's great. Like my dad is going to get better. He's, unless there's something happening with COVID in 6 months with his liver that we'll find out about because no one knows anything. Or my mom's cancer comes back. Everything's great. We have two other my wife's parents who are old, and what's coming next. But where I'm going with this is like, feel like for me, I needed that to kind of come behind me. Like if my cat was sick, I didn't go to the gym because I was emotionally sad, and I just didn't feel like eating because eating is celebrating to me. And it was like my appetite would go down. Like, how can I celebrate? Cat's sick,
Maynard.
Yeah, Maynard. I mean, he was dying for 5 years, and it was like every other week he was in the vet, and I was like, oh, I can't eat because I just don't feel
about it.
Yeah, I mean, we talked. I cried to you on the phone about that cat numerous times. He's gone, and he had a good life, and we have a new one. So for me, I feel like I'm all about inflection points. Like I like New Year's. People like the moon or whatever. I like the inflection points for me to like make commitments. And I made all these commitments to myself in January, and then January 1st, I nearly broke my big toe, and my toenail lifted off, and it was like I can't run. Can't get in the Peloton. I can't, like, it's okay. Well, there goes my year of workout.
Well, here's the thought. For someone who was working 10 hours after they got out of school and then did 10 years of power workouts on the beach, like if I had to draw some kind of conclusion about what your healing would look like, it wouldn't be more doing of anything. It would be a lot less.
Yeah.
And a lot more being with yourself.
Yeah. Well, the good news is I don't have the ability to do what I did years ago because my commitment to my family and my kids, I want to be there for my kids, and that's the reason why I don't work out at 6 a.m. in the morning, because that means I'm not home till 7:30, which means I'm not part of that morning routine, which means I'm going to bed earlier, which means I'm not part of the night, and it just kind of circles. So I'm trying to be present with the kids And, I don't need to be a bodybuilder or a Navy SEAL. It's not my plan right now. I just want to be healthy, want to feel good. So I was, like, maybe I'll just do yoga. Maybe I'll just be that guy that just does yoga all the time, or,
like your dad doing
Yeah,
headstands.
exactly.
That would be a perfect
Right?
full circle.
Right?
With your like balancing. You're going to do yoga in your business suit with your silk.
There you go.
Like, what are these called?
Pocket
Pocket
scarves.
scarves.
Yeah. So my healing is going to begin again, unless something else happens, and I takes my emotions away. I don't know. I mean, I know that I can't let that happen. I have to take care of Elon. And I preach this. I tell this to my employees, work-life balance is also on our walls. And if you're dead, your family can't appreciate you, or they can't benefit from your being living. Like, in the airplane, they tell you to put the mask on you first and then that kid. Because if you're dead, the kid's going to die, right? So it's the same thing. You got to take care of the host, and I've completely failed to do that. The good news is I eat well, so I haven't worked out consistently for probably 3 years. I know when we run 2 miles, I can feel the burn in my lungs. Within that was nothing. I used to run 3 miles with a weight vest in the sand, like an.
When I met Elon, he was doing all of this bullshit. Like, he would sleep for like 3 or 4 hours a night, get up, do these it's like. More than CrossFit kind of crazy things.
Yeah.
And like what the things I've noticed about you, or what I've just been watching happen, I would call it a melting. Where, I mean, I've always felt your heart. I always have. And like, even when you were talking about those psychedelic experiences and you were just wanted to go be with your girlfriend. I don't know if that was Michelle or girlfriend before her, but like, was it Michelle?
Yeah.
That's
Let's
beautiful
be clear.
to me. Like, well, it's like that's when the simulation started showing its cracks.
Yeah.
You went right to your heart center.
The simulation.
You went to Michelle.
That's it.
She knows what she's talking about.
Yeah.
You went right to Michelle, and like I can hear that from you when you're a teenager, and I feel it from you now. And what I have been observing you doing, because I have been honored to be part of the container that's supporting you in it, is a melting. And it's like, I know you have so much do in you, and I know that you're on purpose. So I know that it's not even like, you're not even resenting it. You love what you do, but I hear a real melting in a way that you've been softening yourself and like leading with that heart center. And the way you love on your kids, the way you love on your wife, how much respect you have, how safe you are to be around. Like, I feel all of that. And so I guess seeing over the last couple of years, being able to do coaching stuff with you. P.S. Elon's the first person I ever coached people. He let me practice on him. I was probably pretty terrible off the bat.
Look at her now.
5 a.m. 5 a.m. right? Or 6 a.m. Was it 5 a.m. or 6 a.m.?
Well, yeah, for you. It was early for me to get up and coach with you. But he would coach at 5 a.m. That was like his...
Instead of working out.
And you're creating for yourself. My experience of you is you creating for yourself a lot of safety to soften and feel and be in your heart center. Yeah. And I feel like it balances all of the doing. Yeah. And to me, I think there's some intelligence running, especially over this last year, of just like, how am I going to get that support? How am I going to support myself? How am I going to nurture myself? And my story is you're nurturing yourself with some emotional and spiritual and conscious support.
Well, I find conscious leadership, from working with you and just kind of being, the name of it is what it is. It's being conscious. And that's kind of what psychedelics have been for me. It's a consciousness of, like you said, the simulation that's all bullshit. This is real, the being conscious of what else or what is real, for discussion, or what else is in. And so, you take that
truth.
Yeah. And you take that conscious leadership. And for me, what it does is it just thins it out to like effective words. I had an employee come in the other day. She's like, I just want to come in here and vent. And I'm like, I gotcha. And my instinct was like, okay, here's the solutions. I'm going to hero them.
Oh my God, that makes me so happy.
And she came in, I'm like, would you like me to hero you? She's like, what does that mean? I'm like, give you responses, suggestions, how to fix it. And I'm like, do you want me to get a new side?
You give her the option. That's great.
And I'm like, give me a little triangle. And I'm like, okay, do you want me to be mad with you? She's like, no. I'm like, do you want me to, what do you want? She's like, I just want you to listen. I'm like, just listen.
You just want people to be with us.
Yeah, and
she just want to be seen and heard.
She just needed to be seen and heard. And so then I go home and I've got the, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they're amazing little children, but they're still young. And the 3-year-old's like, he's really smart, but he's a little boy, and I think he's like half raccoon, like with rabies. He's just bonkers compared to my daughter when she was 3. And I have to remind myself, like, he'll cry because he didn't get to use the orange crayon first. And I'm like, dude, it's a fucking crayon. Chill out. But to him, it's everything. That was his crayon. That was his favorite car or his home or whatever. It's like, and I have
it's
to like
his first heartbreak.
Yeah.
We got yeah.
So he was upset. I was handling it wrong. Like, dude, it's a crayon. Let's not get excited. I don't want to be like, don't feel feelings. So I got down on the ground and I gave him a big hug and I said, look, I understand this hurts. And I want you to know that it's okay to feel this way. And I was like, fuck, I just conscious leadership my 3-year-old.
Oh my God.
And that to me was all about like awareness, to be able to like, no, you shouldn't cry over crayons, right? Because I'm a hard ass businessman. We don't cry for crayons. We go to work. We do work. We
need a lot more of them in the world. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Please program all your children to be.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't want to be Elliot from Bedazzled, but I also don't want to be hedge fund bro.
If you don't know who that is, Google it on YouTube because I did, and you'll be grateful.
That's such a good scene. And I have cried at sunsets. I have back to the healing, and there's a lot of unfelt feelings. And, this is years ago, like I was walking in my backyard and a hummingbird came right up and just sat there. And then a butterfly came up. And then like I saw the sun rising. I was like, fuck, what is going on? I just came out. Like there was stuff that had to come out, and it just took that hummingbird. It's like, bro, chill out, let it out.
You can do it. I'm with you, honey.
Yeah,
That's
it's like, and what's funny about that, it's as simple as it gets. I could have been a chimpanzee in the rainforest, and a hummingbird and a butterfly talked to me, or a CEO, leaving his Long Beach home to drive to Garden Grove to run a laboratory. It doesn't matter. We're still creatures from the field, and we have very simple brains. This stuff around us is very complicated. Our egos are complicated. Arab Spring's complicated. Politics are complicated. Hedge fund bros are complicated. But we're just that much different from the beasts in the field. And I think that's kind of what we have to remember. It's just, it's actually all pretty simple. It's like people want to be heard. They want to be validated, treat people nice, and it should work out.
Mic drop.
Right? We'll find out.
I'm like, maybe we just end there. I do want to say that, like when you're talking about your son and being with him and being with your staff member, and then like the support that you've gotten from Bethany, and another part of my religion around nature is like the mycelial network. And, I have a not complex understanding of mycelial networks, but one, they're underground, they're in the soil. You don't really see how much they're working. You totally take them for granted. Yep. And they're just constantly healing and reconnecting ecosystems. And so when I think that is actually what I feel, where I feel the most agency around collective healing is like, when I show up in my seed with the people who are attracted around me and I support their healing and their openness, then they go into their network and they heal. And we just create these networks of healing, which is so much about coming back to the truth of who we are, allowing our feelings, and being our authentic self. And in those ways, it can feel really simple. Yeah, I guess. And the paradox of how also complex collective healing can be.
Yeah. You mentioned yesterday in our circle, patriarchal constipation. And I was just like, that is how you described how women are just constipated with yesteryear's ways. It's such bullshit, and there's a bit of that for men too. I mean, boys don't cry is the root of toxic masculinity. Yeah. And I want to be masculine and, brawny, and because that's what I find for me is what I find that's what I want to be. I don't attract to the feminine side of being a male, but it's not right or wrong, just for me. But not toxic masculinity, not like just crazy throwing things around like like an angry chimpanzee in the jungle, because that's what they do. That works for their society. They get angry, they break shit, they throw shit, they show how tough they are, and they win the female, and that's it. That's everything for them. And like I said, we're not far removed from beasts from the field, so it makes sense that we are programmed for so many years to be a way, and those ways are no longer valid. So for me, I wasn't ever, I don't think I was told not to cry or anything like that, but I'm a leader in my company. I'm supposed to be a strong rock for everyone, And if I'm Elliot, they're not going to follow me to battle, and I mean, that's the truth. And for my family, my wife doesn't need me to be stronger or even as strong as I am, but I think she appreciates that the way our system works has worked out great. But so I've been, not like your words exactly, just not feeling those feelings. There's a humongous reserve buckets full of them that just got tucked away from my 20s and my 30s, and, had kids, surrendered a little bit to that whole process and realized that, the more important stuff is not so much success and the material wealth as just being a great dad and a good husband. That's, those are my top priorities.
It's a pretty transformational plan.
Yeah, it's thrilling to watch your evolution.
Yeah. So I have an interesting, if we have more time, we're okay on time? Mm-hmm. So I have an interesting challenge for myself or for the industry. I'm trying to find someone as a mentor who's, in Bethany, for me, in our industry, because that's where I'm at, CEO owner, not just CEO, because CEO owners are different. CEOs can get new jobs. I'm tied to $2 million of debt here. I can't just quit, right? My house is tied to this place, everything. So CEO owners, and the list keeps going, still married to their first wife, who doesn't have an alcohol, cocaine, or prostitute addiction. And here's the last part, who's not religious. And I have yet to find someone who fits
those. That's it. They don't have to be in the plant world. They don't have to be.
I mean, I'm trying to find someone in the plant world so I can have a.
Oh, you want them in the industry. So that would be.
So I can have a mentor who knows my industry. It would be helpful. It doesn't have to be, but I would take that apart. But my point is, it's very challenging to do those criteria. And I have two people who I know. I won't name their names, Bethany, but you know who they are. Two really amazing men who have fit these criteria, and it's not a bad thing. But they have religion, and when I've asked them to, how do you do this? Like Jesus, like my wife and I go to church. I have Jesus in my heart, and I was like, well, fuck, I don't have that.
I don't have Jesus.
And I don't have
Jesus.
No, I mean, and I don't have problems in my marriage and my kids, and I don't have, I have my, crutch. I smoke a little too much weed here and there, but that's so I don't become a workaholic. But like, and I don't feel like I'm on some sort of trend or trajectory for bad, but I'm curious about how to continue to rise in success, and whatever that means for you or anyone, but without breaking those other categories. And I have yet to find someone.
It's a really good exploration.
I love this. And I think me and you mostly know the same people, so I'm interested about who Lauren knows, but I like that this one is bringing us back to your original, like, how do you identify yourself? Like a person who's a CEO owner, who's married to their first wife, who is not religious, who doesn't have I think you just said cocaine, or alcohol habit. Yeah. Yeah. I love that for you, by the way, as a self-descriptor.
Yeah.
And one of the people that I'm pretty sure you're referring to is actually about to jump into the deep end and is doing the coaches program with CLG starting in a few weeks.
Fantastic.
So
we'll see how Jesus does in there.
We'll see. I think you'll have enough shared language.
Oh yeah.
Maybe that'll be bridgeable.
He'll be able to navigate.
Oh yeah, you're gonna manifest it.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting is, like, when you were talking about being strong and I have to lead my teams, and one thing that I'm really exploring a lot in my work and what's coming up is this transition that I think that we're going to make to a more collective experience, right? Like, our society is built on a really hierarchical experience where one person, leaders, we hold them up, heroes, right? With all this responsibility. And if we're going to put people over productivity, then we have to shift everything around the way that these systems work. And one of those things is one person cannot carry the whole system. Another one is we have to make space for people's felt true experience of life and quit separating professional and personal. So I guess there's a part of me that hopes that there are less and less CEOs that meet the criteria, because I think that it's pointing to something. I think the reason that there are so few that meet the criteria is because it's really too much to ask of anyone, and all the beliefs behind what that role would mean.
Right. I'm really just trying to justify my pot habit, but I'm just kidding, but maybe not. But no, you're right. It's basically an impossibility to reach that level and still be a good human, or maybe it's an arranged, agreed upon, affair or mistress or a little cocaine or a lot of scotch, or but everyone I've talked to has one of those things that they've they're married to the second or third, and I'm not judging. It's just what I want. I don't want to be married to anyone else. I want to maintain. I want to grow old with Michelle. I want my kids to remember me being home playing with them when they were little, and I want to maintain a healthy lifestyle, but also be rich as shit. So can we do all those things? I'm going to try to find out.
You're going to find out. That's one of the questions that your life is here to answer. Right. I think with that whole orchid metaphor, it's like we have a seed and we have a question, and we have questions that our life are seeking to answer. So that sounds like it's one of yours.
Yeah. I love it.
Beautiful.
Great. This was fun.
This was awesome. Thanks for being on the podcast.
I love it. Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Hey everybody, if you've got any feedback for us, we welcome it, or ideas about future guests, email us at healingcollectivepod@gmail.com. Our website is thehealingcollectivepodcast.com. We are at Healing Podcast on Twitter, and we are at Healing Collective Podcast on Instagram. Special thanks to Monda Creative, who edits all of our podcasts, and Two Tall Women Productions, who produce. Thank you.